Hello and welcome. It's time again for Cricket Pundits. Now, after defeating the Aussies, the mighty Aussies, in an epic manner in their own backyard, it is time for us now to do the same with the English in ours. Joining me today, of course, is Ayaz Memon. I almost said Ayaz Pandit. Hi, Ayaz.
Hi, Mandira.
I've been watching Mirzapur. Can you tell? Because one of the protagonists there has the surname is
Yeah,
Pandit.
yeah.
But anyway. So exciting times ahead. I think we've given a fantastic account of ourselves in Australia. A lot of expectations, a lot of pressure, of course, on the India team because that momentum has to carry on as does the ability. And I think obviously there's no question of resting on one's laurels, but I think the Indian team is also ready to now, leave the victory aside and move on from it, having acknowledged. And of course, that was brilliant and a huge achievement. But ab aage dekhna hai.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if they start looking or resting on their laurels, as you say, or living in the past, they'll come to grief. Because there has been, I've noticed a bit of a tendency in the media to underestimate this English side. I would be very wary of that because for a couple of reasons. That if you look at what's happened since they say the turn of the century, England have actually fared quite well in India, except in
Yes.
2016 when they lost four matches out of five. But otherwise, in 2012, they actually beat us after losing the first test. And we were doing the work. We were working for Star at that point in time, Star
Yes.
Sports.
You and I remember
Uh,
that. Yes.
yeah. The other thing is, the other thing is that they're just fresh from a very emphatic 2-0 win over Sri Lanka. Now, Sri Lanka is not the team it used to be 6, 7, 8 years ago. But even so, beating Sri Lanka with spinners, with fast bowlers, and with Joe Root making 400 plus runs in two matches is a big achievement. And then the third factor, they've got the services back of Ben Stokes and Jofra Archer. So this is a team which you're looking at least in the bowling attack, they've got Anderson, Broad, Stokes, Bess, Leach, and Moeen Ali. It's a formidable bowling lineup. The batting is a little vulnerable, but Joe Root, to play his 100th Test match, is putting his best foot forward to remind everybody that he's not dropped out of that awesome foursome of Kohli, Smith, Williamson, and himself.
Of
A
course.
lot of people thought that Root has kind of fallen over the gone below the radar, but that's not true. And Ollie Pope, the young upcoming star, has come back, recovered from injury. They've got Joss Butler, even if it's for one match. So this is not a bad England team at all. And look, as an underdog, as you know, the pressure's on India. England are the underdogs, so they can play more khulla, more khulke. And the last bit which I want to emphasize now, what has happened is unfortunately for Australia, the tour of South Africa got cancelled, so they are not in contention now for the
Test
World Test
championship.
Championship. And England have suddenly come into contention strongly. So if they beat India, the incentive for them, and they would love to play the World Test Championship at Lord in their own country middle of the year. So this is going to be a tough series for India as I see it.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to pick up on a few points that you mentioned. First and foremost, let's talk about Joe Root. As you said, it's going to be his 100th match. Which are some of the other notable milestones one should watch out for during the series?
The milestones are, I mean, there are battles within battles which I would say that one must look at. There's the overarching India versus England, which I think, and we've discussed this in the past, has not been thoroughly exploited by the Indian and English cricket boards in terms of the rich legacy that we've got, socio-political, cultural legacy. Not all of it pleasant, but it's still there, you know. I think it can challenge the Ashes as a contest, India versus England. It's not been exploited. So that's the overarching contest, India versus England. And then there is, you know, Jofra Archer versus Rohit Sharma
Hmm.
or James Anderson versus Virat Kohli. These are battles that, I mean, Virat and Anderson has, in my opinion, been a fairly epic contest between a fast bowler and a batsman because in 2014, I think he got Virat out four times. James
Yeah.
Anderson in England. After that, when they came to India, I think he's gotten. I don't think he's lost his wicket to Anderson subsequently. But what Anderson has also succeeded in doing is not given the liberty to Kohli to score runs freely. So it's been a very taut battle between these two guys. Very fascinating to watch. It will also be fascinating to watch how Jofra Archer bowls or faces up to somebody like Cheteshwar Pujara, who just kind of wears down the bowlers. Because I don't see Anderson bowling more than 4-5 overs in a spell. Also broad, maybe they will play together, maybe they won't because they've got the rotation policy going in. But what will be, in my opinion, the most fascinating battle is R. Ashwin versus Joe Root and R. Ashwin versus Ben Stokes. R. Ashwin versus Steve Smith was one of the big reasons why India beat Australia in Australia. He had him all tied up in his, with his guile and craft and all of that. Uh, and though he's now remembered more for his very heroic batting in the Sydney match, but he took 12 wickets in 3 Test matches, and he really harassed Steve Smith. And then if he can tie Joe Root down similarly, in some way or the other, if they worked on it, Shastri and Kohli and Rahane and all these guys, and also get the better of Stokes, because Stokes is the X factor in this series. So Stokes in the last 2 years has become the best all-rounder in the world.
Yeah.
Perhaps the most valuable cricketer in the world. He's now, in the last 2 years, he's averaging 40 plus. He's made 4 centuries. He's played in India earlier, never had the same impact, but now he could be a different proposition altogether. And he's a left-handed batsman. So it'll be really interesting to see how Ashwin, who experiments so much. A lot of people have been critical of Ashwin for experimenting so much, but I think it really works to his advantage. And look at it, he's touching 400 Test wickets. And on home soil, on Indian pitches, if he can if he restrains Root and Stokes from cutting loose, then I think that it'll prove decisive in the context of the series.
So that's for sure. That's the other milestone, right? Ashwin inching towards his 400 wickets.
Yes.
Also, now, of course, India playing on spin-friendly wickets at home, it's always been to our advantage. Now, Ashwin, of course, is going to lead that spin attack. Jadeja's ruled out. Now, there's talk, of course, of Kuldeep Yadav, and then of either Washington Sundar or Akshar Patel. Who do you think the spin trio is going to be?
Yeah, that's a tough one for Shastri and for Kohli, because with Jadeja not there, you might feel, or they might feel, that the batting is a little weakened, because Jadeja has come along so well as a batsman. So you need his all-round depth, all-round skills. Ashwin, of course, can bat, and probably he'll bat longer and make more runs on home pitches than he did in Australia, though he played a mammoth not-out innings there, which saved the Sydney Test. But they might feel tempted to strengthen the batting, in which case the choice becomes between Washington Sundar and Akshar Patel. So 2 off-spinners, that's a dilemma. Should we play 2 off-spinners? Or if you take Akshar and Kuldeep, should we play 2 left-arm spinners? So it's not an easy call. What I think is clear is that they will play 2 fast bowlers, Bumrah plus whoever, most likely Mohammad Siraj, and play 3 spinners, of which Ashwin will certainly be one. And then it's a combination of what you want from the other 2.
If you said Mohammad Siraj, is that almost a certainty, or will they be tempted to play Ishant?
Well, they might be tempted to play Ishant, but the guys, as they say, Sharir Garam hai. He's come after 13 wickets in Australia. He's a much younger man. Ishant maybe a little ginger, just recovering from injury. And we don't know. It's a 4-Test series. Even in India, they might start a rotational policy, because Mohammad Siraj ended up bowling a heck of a lot of overs in Australia. He played those 2 first-class matches. Then he played the ODIs. Then he played the Test matches, 3 Test matches. So he's done a fair bit of bowling. He's played the entire season of IPL, which Ishant didn't. So he might be feeling, but he's a young man. He's as I keep saying, he's an NCO cutlet. He just wants to be involved in everything, and you have to reward a guy for taking 13 wickets in Australia.
Absolutely.
So
more power to him for that.
Yeah, so I would say that it would be Bumrah and Siraj.
Okay. The other thing is, you were talking about England's rotation policy. And that has kind of come under fire with some of the former greats. Like Michael Vaughan, for example, was not about the rotation policy, but their choice for the selection for the first 2 Test matches is something that Vaughan wasn't particularly too happy with.
Yeah, it doesn't make too much sense. Rotation policy, and yes, the World Cup T20 is coming up, and therefore you want to kind of expose more players to the Indian conditions. But also you can't have everything. You also want to win. Now, Joss Buttler was one of their big players in Sri Lanka. He's playing 1 Test and going back. I don't know why. Johnny Bairstow was the 3rd best player after Root, and 3rd best batsman after Root and Buttler. but he's not come. He's only going to come two matches later or something like that. So it seems to be quirky, the way they are managing their resources. But as they say, nothing succeeds like success. So it's working for them. They actually have split the Anderson Broad opening bowling partnership in Sri Lanka. And it worked for them because Anderson played the second test match, picked up 6 wickets. Broad played the first match, picked up 3 early wickets. So they won both those matches. Now Stokes is in. So, the thing about England is, like, India will be looking at 3 spinners, but they can't afford to have 3 fast bowlers, while England have. So they'll pick 2 fast bowlers, whether it's Anderson Broad or Anderson Vokes or Broad and Vokes. But they also have Ben Stokes, who can play as a specialist batsman or also as a fast bowler who also bats. And then they can pick Moeen Ali and Leach and Bess.
Yes, I think that
So,
seems to be a likely combination. In fact,
yes.
speaking of Ben Stokes, do you see him playing maybe slightly further up the order now that the opener's injured? Jack Crowley, I think he's out for the first 2 matches.
Yes, he's out. So I think he might play up. I think he'll probably play 5. They've got Dan Lawrence who's come in, who's a new, because Ollie Pope is reportedly fit now. So he's coming. He was injured. He's not going to miss match. So it would be, I think it's Root at number 3, Lawrence or Pope at 4. Maybe Lawrence opens then as a backup, and then Ben Stokes at 5. Then you've got Butler at 6, and you've got Moeen Ali at 7, and therefore it becomes a fairly good batting lineup.
Yeah, very strong for sure.
Very strong, and a very strong bowling lineup also.
So मेहमानों की तो बहुत बात कर ली. Now let's talk about the मेजबान. India. So we've discussed the bowling options, the batting lineup. Do you think there's room for Hardik Pandya in the playing 11?
I doubt it. I think that because he's not bowling, so I think they just want to kind of blood him into the system, so to speak, heading towards give him enough opportunities in the nets to start bending his back and seeing how he shapes up. Obviously, he'll play the white ball cricket for India. So, but the testing, and it's a good move, because at some stage I felt in Australia, we won a heroic test series, but at some stage it seemed like we were short, one informed batsman short, that we fought back through our bowlers, and was quite remarkable. But I thought that maybe Pandya should have been retained in the squad then, and not sent back home, which they did. Now we are at home, so he's going to be there. But I see Pant at number 6, and then of course Ashwin, and then Sundar, or Akshar who can also bat. Akshar is a like-for-like replacement in a sense for Jadeja, without quite having the bowling and the batting record that Jadeja has. So I think that India will also look at maybe a batting lineup of 6, 7, including Pant at 6, and then 7 and 8 also batsmen. And then of course you got, Bumrah and Siraj, and then one other bowler. It could be Washington Sundar, then your batting also becomes longer.
Interesting to see how that one pans out. Now, let's talk about one of the most frequently spoken about talking points for the series, which is, of course, the return of Virat Kohli as a captain, and a point to prove after his understanding the job that he did in Australia. Odi, how do you think that's going to be? Rahan has come out and said clearly and happily, I'm the vice captain, and I'm very happy to be blah blah blah. But andar ki kya khabar hai?
No, I think, look, the fact is that there are 3-4 guys who are captaincy material. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Virat is he's the captain. He has been the captain for the last 5 years. There's Rahane, there's Rohit Sharma. I also think somebody like Ashwin has come along very strongly in the last series, and even before that. He's a very, cerebral player. He's also been around for a long while. He's got as much vintage as Virat and Rohit. He's 34, 35 years old. He's probably been performing at his best now. So, and it's not unusual. I mean, I was reading an interview with Dilip Vengsarkar, I think somewhere in Times of India this morning. He made some interesting points. He says, look, in the course of a match, sometimes the captain has to go in. Maybe he's hurt his finger or whatever. So when he comes back, and whoever's the next captain, there might be 3 or 4 wickets that have fallen when he's handling the bowling for maybe an hour or 2 hours. It doesn't mean he continues as the captain. The captain comes back and takes his position. That's the logic of the game. And he gave the example of Azharuddin. He said when Azhar was captain, and Azhar actually captain for 8 years, almost 6-7 years non-stop. There were 5 India captains, hovering around. There was Ravi Shastri, there was Shrikant, there was Dilip Venksalkar himself, there was Kapil Dev. They were all part of the team. And, so I think the Rahane versus Kohli thing is a little exaggerated. I think Rahane has done an excellent job. So Kohli will be conscious of it, that now he needs to take it a step further. And he has to be. But from an Indian cricket point of view, I think the advantage is, if you don't have Kohli, then you have Rahane. If you don't have these two, then you have Virat, you have Rohit or Ashwin. And increasingly, I think somebody like a Bumrah, who's becoming such a force and an influence, not just in the way he bowls, but in the way he's part of that that core group, which is planning and plotting and seeing how the team can perform better. So I think it's a good space to be in for the entire team. But yes, I mean, Kohli playing at home, coming back after becoming father, India has done so well. The
Yeah,
pressure will be on him and on the entire team, but more so on him.
definitely. Now that the pressure is on him, let's talk about the wicket and some bit about strategy. Now the Chennai wicket is like the traditional Chennai wicket, where the first day there's bounce, second and third day is a great batting track, and the fourth and fifth day there's enough turn for the ball. Uh, what would India like to do in terms of the toss, and how do you see this playing out?
Well, certainly you wouldn't want to bat last on
Yeah,
a Chepauk wicket. So, if you win the toss, you bat first and hope that you put up a score of around 400, 425, 450, and you don't have to bat too much in your second innings. That should be the idea. But in case if you lose the toss, then the onus is on the bowlers to not let the team batting first make more than 325, 350, because even on the second and third days, there's enough batting opportunities available on the pitch, so you can overhaul the total, take the lead, and therefore put pressure on the team which has won the toss. If England win the toss, so there are challenges for both batsmen and the bowlers. I think for the home team, I think really it's about if England. This is my feeling that if
hmm.
England approach this series like Australia did, which is make it a battle of attrition, I think they'll come to grief. If England play with a sense of bravado, some daring do, and देखते हैं, let's take the fight to the opposite team. I mean, India is a higher ranked team,
Of
but if
course.
they take the battle to India, like Joe Root did in Sri Lanka, he was on a pitch where others were struggling against the spinners, he was hammering them.
Yeah,
Now, Australia, this series, and in 2018, I mean, 2018, you could have said there's no Steve Smith, there's no David Warner. This time, both were there, but they were ultra cautious, extremely watchful. They were on tenterhooks, and therefore, they not only made a hash of their batting exploits, they dropped too many catches, and we know the result. It was completely unlike what we've seen Australia play. You know, the likes of Hayden and Langer and
of
Ponting
course.
and they would take the fight to the opposite camp. So I think that the team which gets bogged down and gets overly concerned, kya kare, kya kare, kya kare, I think that side is going to suffer.
Based on that particular statement, I think what the Indian team has demonstrated through Australia, and especially through the pitai that we got in Adelaide, is that they were able to not dwell on that, and keep
Yes,
themselves up and go on and regroup and fight and take it to the next day and onwards and upwards.
that
And
that
yeah,
that to me, Mandira, was really the success story of Australia.
yeah,
It's the aftermath of the 36 not out. What happened after that?
yeah,
It's not in the nets, it's not in the middle, it's in the dressing room. What was the communication between the players, between the management, and
yeah,
from what one gathers, and some interesting conversations that Ashwin has had with the coaches and some of the players about what on tour, what transpired. One of the things you realize is that they never talked about it. 36, ho gaya, bhul jao. Again,
hmm.
the next day they didn't go and practice, and because the minute you get into a practice, the next day you start worrying about where you went wrong. So they
Yeah,
took a day's gap and said, okay, let's get over it. You know, we've we played horrendously, or it's
yeah.
been one freakish hour. Put it behind us, and then come back and play as we know we can play, and that's what made the difference.
Absolutely. What a fantastic move. And my last question for you today, all the stalwarts of the era gone by, and I'm talking about the English players, not so much the Indian, they've all predicted an India win. In fact, I think Bumble said either 3-1 or 4-0. Nasir Hussain made it slightly closer. Michael Vaughan. Everybody's predicted a landslide victory in favor of India as far as the Test series is concerned. Aapki prediction?
Well, on home pitches, you would expect India to do well, but I'm a little wary now of what's happening. In we saw in Australia, 36 not out, 36 all out, and then you go and win the series. You lose a match to come from behind and win a series. England have done it once in 2012. We lost at Ahmedabad, then they won at Mumbai, and then they won at Kolkata. Some great counter-attacking knock from Kevin Peterson in Mumbai, Alistair Cook, dogged, solid, run accumulator, and then you had Swan, Monty Panesar, and James Anderson picking up those wickets. So I don't. I think this English team in the last couple of years has undergone a big change in mindset. Few years. It first happened in white ball cricket with Ewan Morgan coming in as captain, and and then they've had this very major segregation of players. Those who play international test cricket and those who don't play, and they play white ball cricket. Apart from a Joe Root or a Ben Stokes, you'll find not too many in common, and a Butler maybe. So that's helped them. And also it's made England realize the virtue of becoming positive, not playing with the pad but with the bat, taking the attack, using their feet to the spinners, not being crease bound, etc., etc. And then they've got some, I think, not that these pitches are going to be of great help to the likes of Broad and Anderson or even Chris Wokes, but they've got the expertise, they've got the very highly evolved skills. And what do you want from Anderson or a Broad? What would Root want is not a 7-wicket bag, but he wants that, get Rohit Sharma out quickly. And if you can also get me Pujara, then good Lord, then you've done Sone Pissa. And then you expect the spinners to come in and, harass the Indian batsmen.
I think it's going to be a battle among equals, to be honest with you. Like you said, both teams coming in the back of two very powerful wins on foreign soil. Yes, India has the advantage; it's on home soil. But given the long breaks of playing in India, they haven't played a Test series in India for such a long time. England has come in the back of a strong victory. Both sides have got players that have really emerged as really strong personalities individually, and they've come together to form a really cohesive and a very strong team. So I think
also the World Test Championship as a backdrop.
Also the West, absolutely right. That is like the biggest carrot that's dangling. I think we have a lot of excitement ahead of us for the next 4 tests, starting from the 5th of February. That's the first one. So we have 4 test matches, we have 5 T20 matches, and we have 3 ODIs. So lots of excitement, lots of a hell of a treat coming up, I'd say, for all the cricket fans. And Ayaz, we will continue our sessions throughout this entire series and continue to have our predictions and counter predictions. Thank you for joining me. Look forward to seeing you on the other side of this test match when we review what will hopefully be an India win.
Thank you. Thank you, Mandira. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks.